Welcome to the very first episode of the Fork This podcast. I'm super excited about this. It's a series I wanted to make for a long time. For anyone who's not seen this before, please do think about subscribing to the channel. Have a look down below and you'll find all the links to all the guests, to all the products and everything and where it's available online. Today for the inaugural episode, I am joined by Adam Hatcher from Leonardslee Family Vineyards. Adam, hi.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mate, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
I've been very lucky to come up here for dinners, for tastings and all sorts already, so I know what I'm in store for, but these guys don't, so hopefully we'll be able to get into that in 1 second. Adam, tell us a little bit about how Leonardslee Family Vineyards started.
Okay, so Leonardslee Family Vineyards, as the name suggests, is a vineyard that is owned by a family. The name of that family, however, is not Leonardslee. Leonardslee Family Vineyards is the brainchild of a lady called Penny Streeter and her family that are based here in the UK. So Penny was originally born from Zimbabwe. She then moved to the UK when she was around the age of 12, so fairly young, and actually lived about 15 minutes down the road from where we are at the moment. And she is quite a determined and driven woman and has made a great success of herself. She started off in the recruitment industry and she built a company quite literally off of the ground called the A24 Group, which was the first 24-hour recruitment company that supplied staff to people like the NHS and other care industries across the world. And it was in 2013, after she'd moved back to South Africa, that she got into the wine industry. So she was going along the south coast of South Africa, looking for somewhere for her husband to moor their boat. And they came across a wine farm at the time called Benguela Cove. Now, this was just a set of vineyards producing grapes to sell on to other people to produce wines from. Upon visiting this place, instantly fell in love with it. Now, at the time, she didn't have any experience in the wine industry, but she always had this passion for good quality wines and service and experiences. So she sort of set about a plan of how she could turn Benguela Cove into the ultimate wine destination over in South Africa. She teamed up with our current winemaker, Johan Fourie, who at the time was producing wines for a different company, but was using the grapes from the Benguela Cove vineyard. So he already knew how unique and special that area was. Within 10 years of their partnership, Benguela Cove was transformed from a wine farm into one of the top 100 vineyards in the world. So it peaked at number 53 in 2023, and it's just gone from strength to strength from there. Now, halfway into that journey, Penny is a lady that doesn't like to sit too still. She's always thinking ahead of herself into the next move and how she can make her business better for herself, but also for the people that work for her and also the customers of her. So she was back over in the UK visiting her 4 children that all live over here, where she came across this property here, which at the time was known as Heath Golf Estate. It had all the sort of hallmarks for a really good property to be able to bring that South African wine experience to. It had the space to plant the vineyards. It had ample of parking to provide a restaurant and wine experiences. And at the moment that she stepped foot on here, she just sort of instantly fell in love with it. And that was the moment that Leonardslee Family Vineyards was born. So the first vines were planted in 2017. Just north of where we are, just on the north side of the road here, up on what was our Kingfisher Golf Course. And we planted the 3 traditional champagne varieties of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. And then a year further down the line, she acquired a property called Leonardslee Lakes and Gardens, where we underwent the biggest garden restoration program in 40 years, going from it being closed to the public to being one of the most visited public gardens outside of the National Trust. And that there is where we planted our 4th grape variety, combining all properties in the UK and South Africa together. So we planted the Pinotage variety, which is a variety that's only really grown over in South Africa, but we use it as an experimental variety here in the UK.
It's one hell of a story, and I think just to jump back in a couple of steps. So it's in 2017 she acquires what was the Heath Golf Estate.
Yes.
Then decides to plant vines. If I've got my numbers right, it's something like 70,000 vines that were planted at the time.
Yeah.
That's in 2017. So then fast forward, it's not until 2020
Yeah, so 2020 was our maiden harvest. The first time we took the grapes off of the vines and started thinking about putting them into bottle. It wasn't a year that we were thinking of doing it because it was still quite early. But if you cast your minds back, it was although we were locked indoors, the weather was perfect for English wines. And it just felt like it would be rude not to put that into bottle. So yeah, 2020 was the maiden harvest, and those wines were then released in June 2024.
We'll get back to that afterwards, because hopefully we'll get to try some of those.
Absolutely.
What makes English sparkling wines so unique? Because again, I know you said there you planted the same grape varieties as would be used in Champagne.
Yes.
So what is it about the English side of things, especially Sussex, and I think a little bit in Kent as well?
Yeah,
What makes it unique?
So English wine has sort of started becoming very commercial because firstly, the climate's getting warmer. So we're now seeing the climate here in the south of the UK as what they were seeing over in the region of Champagne in northern France about 15, 20 odd years ago. So we're actually becoming more suitable to growing those traditional varieties over here than what they are now in the north of France. The second part is the soil type. So there is a band of soil that runs up from northern France, which is a chalky-based soil, runs underneath the English Channel and settles up all across the southeast going along the Downs. And it is the perfect soil type to be able to grow those three varieties and produce sparkling wines. Now, there are a lot of producers out there making still wines. For us, we see that the climate's not quite warm enough to get to that level of sugar that you need in a grape to produce a still wine. So we're very much focusing just solely on sparkling wine. As that, from our point of view, is what the English wine industry can do best, and certainly rival its French counterparts in Champagne.
Being half French, this is hard to have this conversation. But I'll take take it as I have to. What do you think the future for Champagne is? Because that area, obviously, in France is renowned. It's got the appellation for the name of the particular product. What happens?
So Champagne is full of tradition. It dates back hundreds of years, and they make some really fantastic wines. I think there is a stigma not only around the region of Champagne, but the wine industry as a whole, that it is very hard for certain people to change what they've been doing. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. It's been working. They've produced some great quality wines. But now, as Mother Nature is changing, the climate's becoming warmer, people are going to have to start adapting to some of the grape varieties that they produce or some of the styles that they produce. Now, to do that overnight is very tricky. Takes from the moment that you plant a vine, it takes up to at least 3 to 5 years to start producing grapes of good enough quality to actually make a good bottle of wine. So for the whole region of Champagne to dig up all of their vines overnight and start planting new ones would put a real dent in the whole industry. But I think they are starting to make a lot of adaptations to the way that they work. A lot of the bigger producers are now actually coming over to the UK and planting vineyards or associating their names with English vineyards, because even they see the potential that English winemaking and English viticulture has over here.
Yeah, they'll end up buying every estate they can when they need to.
Yes.
Or at least the big houses will, the ones that we all know. And
fingers crossed it's not the case. And I think one of the romantic things about the English wine industry is that 90% of all the vineyards out there are all relatively small. There's quite a lot of family-owned vineyards like ourselves out there, and people are still producing wines because they want to. Yeah. They're not doing it so much for the commercial and the profit aspect, but they want to be able to provide a service. They want to introduce people to English sparkling wines, and they're not looking just to plant to make money. I think those that are probably won't last the distance.
It's a very competitive space.
Price
points, if we can talk a little bit about that. Because English sparkling wine really does end up at a price point that is, fighting against good champagnes, not even your big houses that produce hundreds of thousands of bottles regularly. How do we see that going in the future?
Yeah, it's a very, very tricky thing for a new industry. So at the moment, economies of scale are very small. So for instance, we've got 70,000 vines. We're going to be producing on average, when the vines hit full maturity, anywhere between 70 to 90,000 bottles, depending on the weather of that year and how the harvest goes. Now, to try and get your production costs down to a certain point that you can start competing with the likes of Prosecco or Cava isn't ever going to happen. We very much are on that champagne level in terms of price point. What you'll find, especially with people that are starting out like ourselves, is they will start out with only producing vintage wines, which is where a wine or a bottle of wine only includes the juice harvested from 1 year. Whereas in champagne, if you take a lot of the big brands, you'll find that they'll be called a non-vintage, which is basically using the juice from several different vintages to create a consistent blend. At the moment, we don't have enough back catalogue to be able to make that recipe and produce a non-vintage. But once you do, you start reducing that production cost. So you look at some of the bigger producers in the UK that are nationwide in supermarkets and even internationally. They produce anywhere in the midst of, I think, 4 million bottles is the biggest producer in the UK. And even then, it's still at retailing 20 to 25 pounds a bottle. So even when you start increasing the amount that you produce, we're never going to get down to those levels. But hopefully what you'll find with the UK industry is there is that element of buying locally, but there is that connection. It's people that live in the region of Sussex will have a connection to the Sussex vineyards because they are close to home. They're being made by people that they might even know. So there's always that story to connect people with the actual producer, which is nice.
I'm very impressed with how many references you made to competitors without using a single name.
There's a lot out there, but wine is one of these things. There's so many different types out there that you can't ever knock a quality of a wine because wine has consumers have a very personalized taste. No one consumer is the same as the other, and to say this is the perfect wine for you will never be true. So while some people may very much feel connected with Prosecco because they like that style of wine, you may never actually convince them to enjoy English sparkling wines, which is absolutely fine. So you've just always got to remember in the wine industry that everyone has their own personal tastes, and as soon as we all start accepting that, the more people will feel included in the wine industry, and that you're not just trying to sell them a bottle, you're trying to sell them the actual experience of it as well.
I think the supermarket experience of buying wine has ruined that part of it, because I think there's a paralysis of choice where you stood in front of, let's say, 800, 1,000 different wines. And as you look at it, most people, like you say, what do you like? What are you going to be drinking it with? What are you pairing that for a dinner or something? And then for a lot of people, it's, well, I don't want to go for the cheap wine, but I can't afford a £30 bottle of wine. But what's in the middle ground? So people then, and I feel like that's not necessarily the right way to be selecting what you want to do and how you learn, but it's a real tough market.
What we struggle a little bit with in the UK is consumer knowledge. And I think that can almost stem from the supermarkets having such a vast range. If you look at other models elsewhere in the world, if you go to Australia, you won't find wine or alcohol in supermarkets. You have to go to a specialised shop for it. Therefore, you're going to get specialised staff, you're going to get trained staff who can then share the knowledge. Now, most people in Australia that drink wine will understand where it's produced, how it's produced, and will have a standard of knowledge. Whereas in the UK, there isn't that. And that's no one's fault. It's just the way that everybody's been trained. Wine was just always seen as another alcoholic beverage. And I think now with the younger audience that's coming through, that is a little bit more wary of where their products are coming from, what they're drinking, how it's produced. That knowledge is now starting to grow a little bit. And I think for consumer point of view, they're always going to have more safety in choosing a product that they know about. So the more we can start building knowledge through using things like the wine tourism that's really growing in the UK, the more people will understand, one, why it costs more, but the processes behind it, and they'll start appreciating it more as well.
What it takes to actually make a bottle of wine by the time it's being uncorked here, like you said, you've got years of what's actually gone into make that happen.
From the moment that we planted the vines in 2017 to 7 years later, when that bottle is actually ready to be sold, is quite the length of time, and can certainly adds cost to it.
100%, yeah. And for most people, no idea like what that what that process could look like for 7 years.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, what sort of challenges has the UK wine industry faced?
There's a fair few. Most obvious one being the weather. So whilst we are still a cool climate winemaking region, especially down in the southeast, you can get years where it's just bright sunshine, really nice warm weather, and you can produce a lot of really good quality fruit. You get years like 2024, for instance, where there was 200 hours less sunlight than average, and we never went longer than 6 days without rain during the growing period.
That's really depressing stats, Adam.
And it's one of them ones that you can still produce good quality in those areas, but you've got to have the knowledgeable staff in the right place to make the right decisions at the right time. So definitely weather's the biggest challenge. I think being a new industry is the level of expertise in the field. So whether that be people that want to move to the UK to tend to vines, to be the person that makes the decision over when to harvest, to be a winemaker, or even to help out in the cellar door doing the tourism side. I think that availability of staff there is very low at the moment. We're very fortunate to be very close to Plumpton, the Agricultural College in Lewis, where they do a lot of training in the wine industry. So we are starting to see a bigger influx of good quality people wanting to work in the wine industry. And I always say to people, if you work in the wine industry, don't shy away from hiring people with no experience. As long as they've got some form of appreciation or interest in wine, you can always create that experience. You can give them that knowledge, and they'll then become a lot more passionate about the wine industry as a whole.
I can imagine though that it's hard as well to try and drag people away from beautiful regions in the world like the Riojas and the Côte de Provence, where they could be working on those vineyards,
absolutely.
to then come back over here with, I think your stat was every 6 days there was rain. It's a hard sell.
Yes, it is. Even our winemaker who produces the wines over at Benguela as well, he tries to stay as much of the time over in South Africa, and who's to blame him? Who's to blame him? Because yes, there is definitely a vast difference in the weather.
Yeah, I can understand that. That makes perfect sense. So let's talk a little bit about the future of English wines. What does this look like if we fast forward 10 years from now? And I'm guessing climate's going to play a big factor in this. I'm guessing the kind of market exposure, obviously, in 10 more years is going to be far more advanced. How do you see the industry in 10 years?
So it's one of the fastest growing industries in the UK at the moment. I think the wine tourism section is absolutely booming. I mean, last year we saw growth of about 80-90% in our busiest months. So there is a lot more interest there, which means that in the trade, whether it be smaller independents, restaurants, bigger chains, they are starting to take more English wines on board, which is great for the whole industry. The way I see it going, I think a lot of people will still try and produce smaller plots of land because most people are planted on the South Downs, or we're actually planted in what's called an area of outstanding natural beauty. So to try and make any altercations or build things on that vineyard is very hard to get planning permission for. For instance, our own winery, we're still struggling to get permission to produce the wines on site. Once that happens, we can produce better quality, more quantity, and reach different areas, whether that be domestically or internationally. The way I would love to see it go is for English sparkling wine to be the stable celebration wine, almost overtaking champagne as that sort of number one go-to, and there being more choice. I think the tourism side will take off exponentially, especially once we start working with local councils and government to create these sort of tourist routes, a bit like they have in South Africa or France. I remember a time I was in Bordeaux, and you drive down one road and it's just a road full of vineyards and different chateaus, and you can't go anywhere without seeing one. See, here at the moment, all the vineyards are spread vastly away from each other. Getting between them to doing a tour from different places is very difficult. So once that's all in place, I think the tourism will just keep going from strength to strength. Cellar door experiences will start improving. More people will introduce things like food and wine pairings and fine dinings with wine evenings as well. And as far as the sort of retail side of it goes, I think it will just keep going from strength to strength. You'll start seeing a lot more of your bigger producers, the ones that are making millions of bottles, exported internationally. And now we've got our Sussex protected origin. You may start seeing Sussex as a term that is on a wine list internationally, a bit like you do champagne at the moment. So yeah, there's a lot of room for growth in the English wine industry. I think people are still investing quite heavily into it, which just goes to show the confidence that people have with English wines at the moment.
I'll be honest, so as a French person, it's a very weird thing trying to explain this to English friends, whereby pretty much every household has a bottle of champagne in the fridge.
Yeah.
Just in case on a Sunday, family pop in and say hi, and we'll all share a glass of champagne each. It's just a normal part.
Yeah. So it's right next to the milk.
Yeah, basically. If you have milk in your coffee. But yeah, more important to have the champagne in the fridge than the milk. But I think it's something that is lacking here in the UK. It's not quite the same. And champagne is seen as being like it's got to be a real special occasion. It's something that's, almost out of reach for everyone. And I don't feel like that should always be the case. And again, I can completely understand and appreciate the price points do have an impact. But I do think it's something almost culturally that is very different. And I don't know how easy it is to shift people in that sense.
Yeah, some of the bigger champagne houses, you look at the marketing budgets that they have and how long they have been going for. And they've just got so much backing behind there that you'll see them in duty frees. If people are coming from overseas to the UK, normally the first thing they walk through is duty free, and they just see it plastered with champagne bottles. Now we're starting slowly to get English sparkling wine producers, especially into places like Gatwick, and we're working on more tourism destination billboards to go up there. But they've got so many years head start to us. I think one thing that I saw and sort of came across with the English wine industry is it's the newest industry there is in the wine business at the moment. And when champagne was first launched, if they took a bottle to try and sell to a restaurant, chances are there wasn't any other sparkling wines on the list. So they're then first. If you try taking an English sparkling wine into a restaurant to sell it to them at the moment, you'll already have a Prosecco, potentially a Cava, Cremant, Champagne, Cap Classique already on the wine list there. And people will go for one that suits their budget, which normally in a restaurant with the inflated prices will be a Prosecco or a Cava. So we're facing that challenge of already having competition, whereas all of those regions came in with almost no competition. They started out fresh. They were the pioneers of sparkling wine. So yeah, it's tricky, and we always look back. We've now launched our wine 8 months ago, and you're always trying to pitch yourselves up against the big producers, the ones that have made a name for themselves, and we almost take a step back and think how much we've actually achieved in 8 months with our wines. And it's quite remarkable when you've got a story that's not just made up. It's personal to the owner. It's her real story. It's her life story. People start connecting to it. We've got some really good branding on the wines as well, and the quality of the wines is there once people get the chance to try them. So yeah, it's been a really good, successful first 8 months. Hopefully we'll just keep going from strength to strength from there.
Looking forward to it. We've talked a lot about it.
Yeah.
Is there any chance we could try some?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. What are we tasting then?
So here we have our Blanc de Blanc. So this was our first ever time that we harvested the grapes and put it into bottle back in 2020. So Blanc de Blanc is 100% Chardonnay. So Chardonnay is the most densely populated grape that we have growing here on our estate. It makes up for about 70% of it. And that is because of the position of our vineyards. So we've actually got a very unique setting. We're surrounded by St Leonard's Forest on all 4 sides. And we are slightly higher in altitude than most others. So it sort of raises the temperature up by 1 to 1.5 degrees, and it just means that we're able to produce some really good quality Chardonnay. So this is our signature wine. It's not one that we'll make every single year, only when the weather allows. So for instance, in 2024, as I talked about, a lot less sunlight, a lot more rain, we won't produce a Blanc de Blanc because we don't deem the grapes to be good enough quality. So from the moment that these grapes were harvested, they were sent to the production facilities where the grapes were then crushed and put into their fermentation vessels. So 75% of this actually stayed in stainless steel, which will give the wine a real sort of fresh, fruity character. The other 25% was put through used French oak barrels. Now, what Johan, the winemaker, really wants with his wines is not to overpower the natural fruit flavors with lots of different winemaking techniques. So we only use used oaks. It imparts less flavor. It just gives you a little bit more texture, and we'll never use more than 25%. It's just there to really soften up the wine, round it off, and create a better tasting experience. So from there, the wine then went into bottle in around April time of 2021, where it then went under its secondary fermentation, which is where the bubbles are naturally caused in the bottle through adding a mixture of yeast. 36 months later, we'll finally do a disgorgement process, which is after the bubbles have been formed, we'll carefully, slowly take the yeast out of the bottle before then putting a cork on it, putting the labelling and sending it out for general sale in 2024. So it was 36 months that the wine was actually aging for in the bottle. Again, all adding to the texture and the flavours of the wine itself. So it's a really, really good quality bottle of wine. Very fresh. You get a lot. It feels very cool climate. And what I mean by that is that it should be elegant, light, fresh and fruity rather than your warmer climates where you'll feel a lot more richness, a lot more tropical fruits. It'll feel slightly denser on the palate. So yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite ones that we've got here. So yeah, give it a taste, see what you think.
So Adam, I don't know if you noticed that, but it does a lot of the tastings here and everything else. So it faced it all with the branding in the glass towards me. So I'm just going to shift it back so that you guys can see it as well. That's absolutely delicious.
So it is. It's a very sort of classical style of Blanc de Blanc. You get a lot of those really fresh citrus flavours. You get a little bit more texture on the wine because it's been aged for 36 months. And because of that as well, you also get those slightly yeasty, bready characters in there. But again, it's still really fresh. It's really light. You can have this on its own with things as simple as cured meats, smoked salmons, and is a really, really good wine. Tons of quality. And for our first ever vintage, we're really happy with how the quality's turned out.
Got it right first time.
Yeah, I always liken it to a chef producing a recipe for the first time. They've put together all of these herbs, spices, they've got their meat or their protein, and they've put it in the oven, and they can't do anything with it for the next 3 years. They've just got to sit and wait for 3 years to see how it tastes, and you won't get it right every single time. So for us to produce such good quality on the first attempt is something we're really proud of, definitely.
And it's not just that this is a beautiful wine to drink, but the bottle is also, I think, absolutely stunning. But there's a story behind this as well. And I know a little bit about this, but the swallow on the front, which I think you're going to tell me exactly what type of swallow it is.
Yeah, so before I sort of go into the branding, everything that we wanted to do here is all about the experience. So whether we're taking people up to the vineyards, whether they're dining in our restaurant, staying in the hotel, or even just in our cellar door tasting room, looking at the bottles, we want them to experience something. So we try to really tell a story from the branding. So the logo, the main logo that we decided to go with was a barn swallow. Now, swallows are very famous for migrating south for the winter. So much that when we actually done our first harvest up here in 2020, the swallows were above the vineyard, circling around, making their journey south for the winter, where they'll end up down in South Africa. If I could do that each year, I would more than happily do so. We thought it was a really good emblem to represent not only the company, but Penny, the owner, and her connection between South Africa and the UK. The colour patterns that we've chosen on the label all represent the tones that you will find in a barn swallow's wings. So we've got this lovely sort of dark blue at the bottom with these coppers in there. The texture that you'll find on the neck foil is actually the texture that you will find on the undertone or the underside of the swallow's wings. On the back of the label, trying to bring in that family element, you've got the mother swallow there being followed by each of her 4 children, again representing Penny and her 4 children that are here in the UK. And then simple things from on the back of the label, we've got everything from the exact amount of bottles produced, the year, the disgorgement date, which is when we took the yeast out and the product was finished, through to the percentage of grapes that we use in each bottle. And then the final thing is to celebrate the opening of each bottle. There's a lovely little handwritten message on the inside from Penny, the owner herself, just saying, "Here's to you, Penny Streeter, OBE." So yeah, it's a really well thought about bottle, all telling a story of its own right.
And it tells a fantastic story. And to be fair, seeing and having met you guys and met everyone else that works here as well, there's a real love for this.
Yeah.
I think that's such a big difference
Yeah, absolutely.
from a lot of the bigger houses. And obviously when we're talking about champagnes and other things where it's almost become just another job, this feels like it's a family run operation.
Definitely. And as much as the family element incorporates Penny and her family, it also incorporates all the team that we've got here. Johan's worked with Penny in the wine industry from the start. Barry, who is our viticulturist here, he met Penny over in Benguela Cove and has followed her over to the UK to work here. So we've all sort of been included in the family. We're a relatively small team, everything from the restaurant to the cellar door to management. There isn't many of us, and we do all feel a real sense of pride in the wines and that sort of family element amongst peers.
I think this is amazing, and as I've told you as well, like, we're going to try our best for this podcast series to take a product into each of the following episodes, so that way we can introduce your product to our next guest. But for this first one, obviously being inaugural, that makes it a little bit more challenging. So what I brought along today is part of what we've been working on, which is a tapas at home kit, which hopefully will be available very soon. Check the links below, and if it's not, keep looking for the links below. But what we have is some 8-month-old Manchego to go with this.
Excellent.
And some hand-carved jamón ibérico, but the proper stuff.
Nice.
So I'd love you to have a taste. Tell me what you think of the Spanish tapasy bits, and then obviously we'll double check whether or not it goes well with the wine.
Absolutely.
I'll jump in with you. So are you a big fan of cheese?
I am. Especially more hard cheeses than softer and, say, vibrant tasting ones.
Yep.
And I love things, that's why I love things like cured meats, but that salty character. And that's what I love about Manchego as well. It has that, it's Spanish and it fits in with that sort of tapas style because it has that salty character to it. which I think when we get round to pairing it with it, the acidity from the actual wine itself will actually cut through that saltiness and bring it into more of a fresher character.
I decided to just double check if you were right, and I'd have to agree. That goes very well together. This could end up being a nice little tapas board.
Yeah,
we can throw a bottle of Leonardslee in there.
Do this more often.
Just to mix this up.
Yeah.
Please try the ham and let us know what your thoughts are as well. So Spanish ham is something that I find is a real struggle, again, here in the UK especially, because people buy the hams in the supermarket out of a little kind of cellophane pack.
Yes.
If you've ever actually been to Spain and you've had it in a tapas bar where they've sliced it for you in front of you, it's a completely different ballgame. And I think this is something that I'm really trying hard to find a way to get in front of more people with.
Yeah.
And that people understand as well. It's a completely different product. Again, understanding how you end up with a pig that has only eaten acorns and who has been kept and reared for the right amount of time in the right areas, in the right climates, that then ends up with this kind of level of product. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, really good. Really good. It feels authentically made. Like it feels, rather than mass produced, it feels like it's produced with people that care about it and the quality, which again fits in very well with the wine, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. I think the fatty parts on the meat really go well with the texture from the wine itself as well. And I'd say you're off to a good start.
So I've done a decent pairing for the first ever episode.
Absolutely.
The next bit is going to be interesting, is where Leonardslee ends up in the next episode. But
the expectations are high. The expectations are high.
It's going to be an interesting one. Listen, this has been absolutely fantastic. I've loved our conversation.
Yeah, it's been good.
Is there anything that people should know about Leonardslee Family Vineyards before we wrap up? Would you like to explain some of the... I know you guys do some incredible different packages for some wine tourism if people want to come down and try and experiment.
I would say to people that if you haven't tried wine tourism yet, or you've even been to a couple of vineyard tours, what we try and offer here is something very unique and different. It's all a very relaxed atmosphere. You don't need to know all of your wine knowledge to be able to appreciate it. We've got staff here who are trained to be able to deal with the people that has been drinking wine for 60 odd years and only drinks the finest of red wines. But we also are trained to deal with people that may never have drunk a glass of wine before and just want to learn a little bit about it. The offering that we have is very much tailored around the wines and the overall experience. So you can, if you wanted to just drop in, you can do a wine flight where you just get the chance to try all of our range. Or you can come along and do what is called the Leonardslee Ultimate Experience, which is pulling together everything that we offer here, from wine tourism to food to the overnight stay. Everything is tailored around people enjoying their experience.
And I can speak from experience as well, because I have been here to eat, and I've done some of your wine and dines as well. Your chef, if I'm correct in saying this here, has actually come over from South Africa?
Absolutely, yes. So Kelly was one of the head chefs at one of the restaurants in Benguela Cove. Again, bringing in that family element. We've got a lot of people that have flown over from South Africa to be part of the journey. Even at the property further down the road, Leonardslee Lakes and Gardens, we've got a Michelin-starred restaurant Interlude, where Jean came over from South Africa, one of the restaurants there, and within 9 months, I believe it was, he had his first Michelin-starred here. So we do have a lot of South African people that have come over to work here as part of the business because they believe in the journey, they believe in Penny's vision, and they wanted to be a part of it. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not one of them. I am Sussex born and raised, but I hope my goal one day, maybe I'll go the other way and start working for Benguela.
Or at least every winter, right? Just
Absolutely.
Get out there.
Go and be part of the harvest.
Follow the swallows.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Listen, our last question for you, because I've always got to end these things on something different. I did give you a heads up on this, so I'm hoping you've had a good think. But if you could only eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would that meal be?
I think it would have to be something traditionally British. And
Really?
I think I am always a big fan of sort of home-cooked foods. I think you can never beat a good home-cooked meal. And my go-to would have to be a Sunday roast.
Oh,
I
Sunday
think
roast.
a Sunday roast, a good bottle of wine, 5 or 6 people there, friends, family. I think there is just no beating it. But the only downside is the washing up. But apart from that, I think a good Sunday roast, all the trimmings, good bottle of red wine, and yeah, that
This
would
raises
be my dream.
This raises one big question.
Yes.
For you, a perfect Sunday roast includes which meat?
Depends on the time of the year and the mood. I mean, I was actually here having Sunday roast in the restaurant that we've got on the property, and it was a sort of pulled beef brisket, which was just so soft and tender. And beef wouldn't normally be my go-to. I think you can never go wrong with chicken as long as it's seasoned properly. I think if I was going extravagant, it would be leg of lamb.
Adam, thank you so much for today.
Pleasure.
Really appreciated this, and we can't wait to take Leonardslee on tour with us for the next episode.
We can't wait to show people what the wines are like.
100%. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.